10 past 11, a Tuesday night. One lamp on in the kitchen, and under it a form that wants a name, an address, a signature. Your tea has gone cold beside it. 40 minutes now. 6 tabs open, the pen's reordered, 1 message answered. The form is still empty. And here is the strange part. You were the quick one at school, the one who finished first and got bored waiting. Maybe you have lost whole evenings like this, to tasks a child could manage, while knowing the entire time that you are not stupid. If that is you, the rest of this is for you. Everyone tells one story about quick minds and restless attention. The story is wrong, and the true link between them has kept people like you invisible for years. The flattering story. You have heard the flattering version. That restless attention is the tax a quick mind pays for its speed. That the mind which loses the keys is the same mind that finds the ideas. Somewhere along the way the story picked up grander names, a hidden gift, an untapped superpower, the restless cousin of genius. It is a kind story, and kind stories travel further than true ones. Notice, too, why the myth needed intelligence in it at all. A struggle with boring tasks sounds like a flaw. A struggle caused by too much brilliance sounds like a compliment. So the condition got rebranded as an overflow of the very thing it quietly undermines, and everyone felt better, except the people living it. Part of why it travels is that it survives on survivors. Every roll call of restless high achievers is really a list of the ones who made it. It quietly leaves out all the people this condition buried in unfinished degrees and lost jobs. Nobody writes articles about them. So the visible sample glitters, and the glitter gets mistaken for the rule. And if you struggled anyway, the story had a job for you too. You were simply not using the magic properly yet. But sit large groups down and measure, and the pretty version falls apart. The group with attention problems does not score higher on intelligence tests than anyone else. On average, it scores a little lower, yet even that number says less than it seems, because of what an intelligence test actually is. A test is an hour of holding instructions in mind, juggling sequences, racing a stopwatch. Working memory and processing speed, the two things this condition drags on hardest, are baked straight into the score. So the test does not just measure the mind. It also measures the condition standing in front of the mind. Strip those sections out and much of the gap closes. Nor does a high score protect anyone. The condition turns up right across the range of measured intelligence. No more common at the top, no rarer either. And no gentler when it lands there. The clinicians who work with the sharpest cases keep repeating one line. The impairment is the same size. A high score just hides it longer. Then there is the story about hunters. A writer in the early 1990s suggested restless minds were born for the hunt. Built for scanning, chasing, thriving on the sudden, and simply stranded in a world made for farmers. He offered it as a metaphor and said so himself. The metaphor boarded the internet and came back wearing a lab coat. As science, it has never stood up. As comfort, it works a little too well, because it turns a daily struggle into a noble inheritance and quietly suggests nothing needs fixing. The one grain of truth sits in creativity, and even that grain is smaller and stranger than the posters claim. People with this condition often do generate ideas more freely. Fewer breaks on the brainstorm, more unexpected turns. But the same missing breaks savage the other half of creating, the narrowing, the finishing, the seeing it through. More beginnings than anyone, fewer endings than most. That is not an advantage with a small catch. It is one system failing in 2 directions at once. Which is why the people who spend their working lives with this condition push back so hard on the flattering version. Not because it is unkind, because it is untrue, and because a person promised hidden treasure does not ask why the map keeps failing. They just double down on the engine, read more, learn faster, get cleverer. Since the story says the engine is the point, nobody mentions the driver at all, and the pushback is not grimness for sport. Unrecognized, this condition costs real things, job savings, relationships, the tone a person uses with themselves in private. The clinicians refuse to let something that expensive be cute. A kind story can still be a cage. The engine and the driver. Strip the myth away and a better question is left standing. If the mind is quick, what exactly keeps failing? From the outside, the failure gets moral names: careless, unreliable, lazy on the worst days. From the inside it feels like weather. Some days the sky lets you work. Some days it simply will not, and nobody, including you, can say why. The honest answer needs 2 systems, not 1. Think of intelligence as the engine, raw horsepower, speed of reasoning, reach of memory for facts and patterns. Now think of executive function as the driver. The one who starts the car holds the route in mind and ignores the billboards. The one who brakes at the junction and keeps their temper in traffic. They are different systems. They are built separately, they fail separately, and one cannot stand in for the other. This condition is a problem with the driver, and a stronger engine does not steer, so the strange scenes of your life start to make sense. You hold a 5-step plan in mind and walk to the next room. You arrive with none of it, because the working memory dropped the load on the stairs. You read the same paragraph 4 times, and the words slide off like rain off glass. You know exactly what needs doing. You even want to do it. The task is small, clear, and sitting right there, and the starter motor simply does not turn. Clinicians call that an activation problem. It looks identical to defiance from the outside and feels nothing like it from the inside. The driver also decides what to ignore, and that decision fails in its own way. The hum of the fridge, a conversation 2 desks over, the label inside your collar. Background gets promoted to foreground without your consent. It was never that nothing held your attention. It was that everything did all at once with equal force. Time behaves badly too. 5 minutes and 50 are hard to tell apart from the inside, so deadlines stay abstract right up until they turn physical. And sometimes the whole thing inverts. Hours vanish into one absorbing thing while the urgent thing starves. The attention was never absent. It was unsteerable. Which produces the strangest scene of all. The same person can be superb in an emergency, calm, sharp, decisive while the building burns, then unable to open a letter on an ordinary Tuesday, because urgency is structure. A crisis tells the driver exactly what matters, and for 1 hour the steering is easy. Ordinary life never does. One clinician watched this split so often in one particular group that he gave it a name. Thomas Brown spent years assessing adults of a specific kind. Their reasoning sat near the top of the scale, their working memory and processing speed dragged somewhere far below. The same person, the same afternoon, both things true at once. By the time these adults reached his office, they had tried everything effort can buy. Lists, promises, shame coffee, brand new starts every January. If willpower could fix a driver, there would have been nobody left for him to study. He sorted the driver's work into plain clusters, getting started, staying focused, sustaining effort, managing emotion, using memory, watching your own actions. And for the people living that split, he had 3 words. Smart but stuck. The phrase outlived the paperwork because it is exact. Not a weak mind, a strong engine, an exhausted driver, and a lifetime of being marked on the driving. Because the driver holds more than the wheel. The same system regulates emotion, which is why a small setback can arrive at full volume. Why irritation flashes before you can name it. Why the shame afterwards outlasts the anger. That volatility is not a separate flaw riding alongside the condition. The people who study it place it inside, part of the same overloaded driver. If the car picture does not fit your life, leave it at the curb. No single picture fits everyone, and not matching this one is not a failing. The engine was never the problem. The mask. On paper you were fine. Read that again the way a teacher would have. Decent marks, no alarms, a report that said more effort needed and left it there. On paper was the only place anyone looked. Because here is what intelligence actually does inside this condition. It cannot repair the driver. So it compensates, quietly, expensively, for everything the driver drops. The essay never gets planned across a fortnight. It gets conjured the night before, whole, out of panic and raw ability, and it lands a decent mark anyway. The revision timetable never exists. The exam gets passed regardless, on memory and nerve. From the outside, results. From the inside, a private system of last-minute rescues that costs triple and can never be admitted to anyone. And triple is barely an exaggeration. It is the exam, plus the panic that forced the exam, plus the flattened day after. Doing the work, building the fear that extracts the work, repairing whatever the fear broke on its way through. Childhood quietly lends structure on top, and nobody counts that either. School is an exoskeleton. The timetable decides the hours and the bell decides the transitions. A teacher chases whatever goes missing, and a parent stands over the packing of the bag. Your parents, in fact, became a second nervous system without ever naming it. The lift to practice, the rescued kit, the sudden printouts at midnight, love, quietly doing the driver's job. With that frame around you, the driver barely has to steer, which means the driving problem stays exactly where nobody can see it, inside a life that has not yet asked you to drive. There was a social patch too, and you built it young. You got funny about the forgetting, or charming, or endlessly apologetic. Likeable cover for an executive hole. People forgave the missed message because you were worth forgiving, and every act of forgiveness buried the pattern a little deeper. Now put all of that next to how recognition actually works. Nobody screens the inside of a mind. The system moves when daily life visibly breaks. Missed deadlines, failing marks, lost jobs. The checklist looks for wreckage. Compensation keeps the wreckage off the books. So the checklist is really asking whether you are coping, and you are, barely, at a private cost-no-column-ever records. The struggle is real, the load is real, and by every visible measure there is nothing to see. In the sharpest cases, the disguise runs both ways at once. The ability hides the struggle, so no teacher ever refers you for help, and the struggle blunts the ability, so nobody ever sees your full reach either. Two remarkable things average each other out into one unremarkable pupil. Middle of the class, bored and drowning at the same time. Both halves go unrecognized. That is the cruelest arithmetic in this whole story. Think back to your own school years for a moment. Somewhere in a drawer at your parents' house there is probably a cream page that proves all of this. The same sentence every year, in different handwriting. Bright, but easily distracted, doesn't apply himself. And the one that follows people for decades. Not living up to potential. They were looking straight at the mask and marking you on it. The report was never describing a child who would not try. It was describing a child spending everything, every day, to make trying look optional. The mask held. That was the damage. The quiet version. There is a second myth to clear, and it hides inside a reasonable-sounding sentence. If this were real, school would have caught it. But school does not catch conditions, it catches disruption. Attention problems make two kinds of noise. One is external, out of the seat, calling out, in trouble by Tuesday. Institutions are built to hear that kind because it costs the classroom something. The other noise is internal, a constant private static. No institution has ever had ears for that. So the loud version collects referrals and the quiet version collects nicknames. Away with the fairies. Shy, bright but somewhere else. A pupil by the window, homework genuinely forgotten rather than refused, a seat moved closer to the front, and that is the end of the intervention. Quiet struggling reads as mild personality. None of this needs a villain, either. A teacher with 30 pupils triages by flame, not by smoke. The system did what overloaded systems do. You were simply the smoke, and the research on late recognition keeps circling one uncomfortable pattern here. The quiet presentation is the one that waits longest for a name, and it is disproportionately the version girls learn to wear. Not exclusively, plenty of boys drift by the window too, and plenty of girls get marched to the head's office. But a girl who underperforms gently, apologizes beautifully, and keeps her chaos zipped inside her bag is read as a mood, a phase, a temperament. She grows up into a woman running a full compensation system before 9 in the morning, and no one has ever once said a clinical word about her. She is easy to find in any office now. The immaculate diary, the early arrivals, the reputation for being so organized. Nobody guesses the organization is the life raft. Years later, the same split repeats at work. The loud struggle gets a meeting with a manager. The quiet struggle gets a reputation. Maybe your own school years were loud instead. Everyone saw, and the name still took decades. That is not the wrong way round either. A mask is common, not compulsory. The point is narrower and sharper than any single childhood. School was never the safety net people assume. It catches the children who cost it something and waves the rest through, which quietly rewrites a sentence you may have used on yourself. If it were serious, someone would have caught it. No. If it were loud, someone would have caught it. Serious and silent get waved through together. So an adult discovering this late has not failed to be found. The net was never under them. Where it breaks. From the outside, what happens next looks like a person who suddenly stopped trying, the clever one who drifted, the bright start that faded. From the inside it is simpler and worse. The borrowed structure runs out, and the bill for years of rescues finally arrives. Ask the people who assess adults for this condition. They describe the same 4 doorways, so consistently it is almost a timetable of its own. And notice the shape of the word. Doorway. Not cliff, not collapse. People walk through doorways on purpose, towards good things, a degree, a career, a family, a step up. That is the trap's particular cruelty. Every one of these doors was a reward. The first doorway is university. First term, first time away from home, every scaffold vanishes in a single September. No bell, no register, nobody chasing. In place of a timetable, a reading list, and a deadline weeks away. A structure you are politely expected to build yourself, out of a skill you were never once forced to grow. There is usually a color-coded study plan pinned above the desk, made in the first week's optimism, abandoned by November. It stays on the wall all year, like a small accusation. The unread pages stack up beside the bed like quiet debt. The night before magic that rescued every exam meets a full term of material and loses for the first time, and because the room is suddenly full of clever people, the old camouflage of being quick stops covering anything. Some walk through this door and only wobble. For others it is the first missed deadline of an entire life, and it lands like a verdict. And asking for help feels absurd because on paper nothing is wrong yet. What would you even say? That the reading is too easy to begin. The second doorway is the first demanding job. Work arrives without edges. No marking scheme, no term dates. Just an inbox that refills itself and priorities that shift by the hour. Open plan noise where a classroom's walls used to be. The email you starred on Monday resurfaces a month later with consequences attached. A strange split opens up, too, praised in the meeting for the big idea, chased afterwards for the expense form. The interesting work floats. The maintenance work drowns. You can be the brightest hire in the building and still watch the office quietly organize itself around you. The follow-ups, the small admin, the forms. Then a manager writes one familiar word in your first review, and the cream page from the drawer has officially followed you to work. The third doorway is parenthood, and it cuts the deepest. A baby is scaffolding in reverse. It imposes chaos and demands structure all night, every night. Broken sleep dissolves exactly the working memory that was holding the whole act together. The spare capacity that funded every rescue is spent by 6 in the morning on feeds and washing. The nappy bag gets packed and still left by the door. The pram blocks the hallway you keep meaning to clear. The washing machine sings its little song and gets forgotten anyway. The health visitor asks about the baby's routine while your own days dissolve in front of her. Somewhere in the noise you notice you have not finished a hot cup of tea in a month. Many adults who finally go looking for answers date the search from these months. Not because the condition arrived with the baby, but because the mass could not afford them both. The fourth doorway is the strangest reward this condition ever hands anyone: promotion. You survived the doing on engine alone. So they promoted you away from it, into organizing, a job built almost entirely of the driver, other people's priorities, meetings about meetings, delegation, follow through, a diary that breeds one-to-ones faster than you can reschedule them. Your own best work now happens after hours, once the office empties and the meetings stop, which is exactly when the working day is supposed to end. You write appraisals now. There is a fair chance you have written the word potential on somebody else and felt the floor tilt slightly as you did. The prize for years of compensating turns out to be a role made of the exact thing being compensated for. You may have walked through one of these doors already. Whichever one it was, notice what they share. None of them made you less able. Every one of them either removed borrowed structure or raised the load on the driver, usually both at once. The mask was never free. It was rented, and every door put the rent up, and the doors do not queue politely. A new job lands in the same year as a new baby. Or the step-up arrives while the moving boxes are still taped shut. One door alone raises the load. Two at once is how a decade of coping ends in a single spring. Nobody stopped trying. The scaffolding ran out. The gap. So add the 4 doors together, and you are left standing somewhere very specific. Call it the gap. On one side stands the person everyone predicted, the early promise, the potential, the ghost who did apply himself. On the other side sits the record, the half-finished courses. The project's abandoned, a step short of done, the books face down at chapter 3. The emails drafted and never sent, and the CV with the odd-shaped years you have learned to narrate around. Everyone else measures you against the room. You measure yourself against the ghost. And the ghost always wins, because the ghost never had to drive. It is tempting to blame the people who kept saying potential, but be honest about the harshest reader in the room. The teachers moved on years ago. You are the one who kept the file open. Reopening the evidence on quiet nights, prosecuting yourself with a quick mind that never runs short of exhibits. That is the cruel twist of intelligence inside this condition. It cannot repair the driver, so it moonlights as the prosecutor. Every unfinished thing gets filed as proof of character. And the case sharpens every year because the barrister does. Even telling people gets complicated. Say it out loud and half the room answers that everyone is a bit like that. They are half right, which is exactly what makes it hard. Everyone forgets keys. Not everyone builds a second, secret life around the forgetting. For years you assumed they did, that every person in every room was privately sprinting, patching, rescuing, and simply better at hiding the seams. It is genuinely disorienting to learn how many people just start things, follow the plan, finish, no private war first, and take stock of what never made it onto anyone's ledger. The alarms stacked 5 deep. The notes on the mirror, the phone buzzing reminders like a nervous secretary. The elaborate private, handmade machinery of a person keeping a life airborne with no autopilot. That machinery is not evidence of brokenness. It is evidence of engineering. You have been running mission control for a launch nobody knew was happening. Daily for years, unpaid and unthanked, while calling yourself lazy the whole time. Then one day the mechanism gets named. in an assessment room, in a book, in some video late at night, and two things happen at once, and they do not cancel out. Relief, because it was never laziness, never a verdict on character, never a lack of wanting it enough. And grief for every year spent paying a tax that nobody itemized. The evenings, the rescues, the apologies, the shame, a load carried daily, alone, and filed under personality. Some people cry at the naming, and not exactly from sadness, from decompression. Years of bracing released by one sentence from somebody qualified who is not surprised by you. Being unsurprising, it turns out, is one of the great luxuries of a life. Both feelings are correct, and they are allowed to sit together. So reread the cream page one last time, slowly. The report was never wrong about the ability. The ability was there, and it still is. The report was wrong about what stood between the ability and the page. The gap in your record is not the measure of your character. It is the measure of an invisible load, its exact shape, its exact weight, its daily cost. Measured honestly, the gap stops being a list of failures. It becomes the weight of what you carried, counted at last. None of this hands the years back, and pretending otherwise would be one more pretty story. What it hands back is the authorship. The past stops reading as a character study and starts reading as a systems report. Same events, different author. And a systems report, unlike a school report, comes with adjustable parts, and a name changes the direction of effort. Years went into disguising the load. The same effort, pointed at the load itself, structure chosen on purpose, help asked for without shame, travels further. Not because trying harder finally works, because trying accurately finally does. Disguised effort looks like promising to remember. Accurate effort looks like refusing to trust memory at all and writing things where your eyes cannot miss them. One spends willpower, the other spends ink. To be plain about the limits of a video, though, none of this is a diagnosis. A pattern on a screen cannot say what is true of you. That takes a proper assessment with a qualified professional. What a pattern can do is send you into that conversation carrying a better question than lazy. And maybe this map is not yours at all. Maybe the gap in your life answers to some other name. Then keep the mechanism and leave the label, nothing here ranks anyone. Understanding how driving fails makes the road kinder for every driver on it. The gap was never empty. It is still 10 past 11 somewhere. The lamp is on, the tea has long gone cold, and the form is still lying there with its 3 blank lines. Nothing about the form has changed. But the person at the table finally knows what actually sits between them and a signature. Not a character flaw. Not a shortage of intelligence. Nothing that deserved 20 years of quiet prosecution. A quick engine, an overloaded driver, and a cover story so good it fooled everyone, including the person wearing it. Not an advantage, a disguise. So the link in the title was real all along, just never the one the flattering story sold. Intelligence and this condition are connected the way a mask is fitted to a face. Somewhere out there tonight, another clever person is calling themselves lazy over an empty form. You know better now. You could even be kind about it, starting with the person at your own table, and leave one thing in the comments, because the pattern lives there. What was the sentence your school reports repeated about you, year after year, word for word, if you can still remember it?